Despite these small thorns on my destiny, I still remember the Lombard capital with a mixture of nostalgia and desire. I had some little friends, the only normal ones in my life, with whom I spent a few quiet hours at home, playing and being pampered by their mothers. Two other neighbors' children came to my house to let me play with markers and crayons. I have long invoked their names in the poisoned, lonely evenings in Naples. Down here I alternated melancholy with the memory of the rare sunny Milanese afternoon and of and one of the park that stretched near the condominium with the railway workers' lodgings. When it was warm enough, I would run down the lawn, and I liked to lie down in the fresh, clean grass, freshly mown by the condominium gardener. There were also many flowers, mostly poppies. This is the first moment in which these humble, slow showy, generous flowers entered my life. The poppy has always remained in my heart, because unlike the haughty rose, it was touched, lived through, even crumpled without some angry botany enthusiast coming to scold me or send me away. In recent years I have dedicated my universalist philosophy to the poppy, to this flower, but this story will come later. Even up there, in Milan, by forcibly uprooting um, herself from her native environment, my grandmother came to visit us. According to my mother, several years later, her sole purpose was to forge ties with my father and drag him south with her again. In fact, a few months later, he tried again to ask for the transfer and got it, marking my final ruin and this future loneliness. I can't say my grandmother didn't love me like my father. She had her own way of showing affection to me. The affection passed through humiliation and derision. But if you were intelligent enough to not to take it, it could also turn into an exclusive, almost morbid preference. I will dedicate my life and my sanity to my grandmother in later years, but only because I had no other places to go, other people to be with. Come to think of it, even though I was born and raised in a fairly visible family from the outside, I have always lacked real parents. Milan represented for me a happy parenthesis, a kind of island that does not exist in my later memories. I like to think that maybe life was different there, that people were kinder and more altruistic. Obviously, I was exaggerating, but perhaps I, I had led myself to do so, to think so, uh, when I was forcibly transplanted into a rough, hostile environment, full of slander and crime, like that of the deep southern province of Naples. We are all my family was fond of me as a baby. It was impossible not to get caught up in the tenderness and sense of protection towards such a small, helpless, defenseless being. Everyone is fond of that, of every baby in the world. The little woman, The women cry out with joy when they see their babies, and the draft man smiles sweetly and sympathetically when the coats of the carriage are lifted and those rosy faces appear, indifferent but so sweet in their nap after feeding. I have always wondered why the more men appear partial, emotionally oriented towards safeguarding the child, the more full of prejudices, violence, insults they then show towards adults. It would seem that with the attainment of sexual maturity, a human being attracts toward himself the stars and the tones of the world around him which judges him in case as a potential threat to his own status quo. It happened to me in my 30s. I realized that no one had more understanding of my mental illness, that indeed if I had not raised the walls and defenses I would have been crushed, beaten, eliminated by those who a few decades earlier had allowed their hand to me and ensured me refuge and protection in case that I needed it. Something rotten is hidden in this partiality of behavior towards beings of different ages. This is exactly what I was talking about before. A blindness of the human in the face of the weak and easily neutralized people. And on the contrary, a morbid fear of those who consider themselves equal. The so-called Homo lupus, which every social order protects itself from the beginnings of history. Thus, the tears and smiles of compassion that inspires the handicapped, the visible ones, not the mental ones, to the old, to the last the old people, the dying people, the puppies of dogs and cats, the newborns, the tender flowers and their more than fragile things, depend on the hypocrisy of the order who on one hand feels separated forever from the feelings and sensations of his childhood. On the other hand, he has completely forgotten that he too was a child one day. Every adult has in him the child of the past, but does not see him or thinks he sees him in something else. First of all, his own children. What comes from this voluntary exit from one's ego, the path of self-disclosure of one's universal consciousness, is interrupted and is simply delegated to someone else. I no longer feel it like a child, but I protect who I was. I no longer remember being, and that I no longer remember being. Following the arguments, I also came to explain about the sports and rejection of me as a teenager. As a child, you were so cute, shy and sweet. Now you are just like your father. You make me sick. Many things are to be right about the child, but not what we think. Beauty fades. Smallness and the sense of superiority that derive from it in us observers change and sooner or later disillusion us. On the other hand, the possibility of recreating in ourselves the psychic approximation to existence that is proper to the impoverished child and never fades. I am not referring to his innocence, or to a bigoted mania to call the child of less danger, only because we are subconsciously certain we think best that we can mow him down with a fingernail. I call a partial unconsciousness of being here and now, is that little one has to accept life and death, joy and fear, as it should be accepted by the wise adult. Like passing shadows and endless over on a substantially empty table, indifferent, free from the permanent jaws of civil society. This is why it is said that that every sage is also a little child. Every sage is also a little child. Wisdom is the path of man to regain the intellectual simplicity of the child. We must heal the child and make it reborn within us, and not in the world into which, by creating and by battling, we have thrown. In the next video, I'll talk about my brother. In the meantime, see you in the next video.